This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
"172 students rescued after gunmen attack a learning institution in Nigeria's Kaduna State. Dozens of ambassadors based in Ethiopia visit Tigray region and offer their support in restoring calm. And Rwandan President Paul Kagame gets COVID-19 vaccine amid efforts to roll out inoculations across Africa. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Ramanyang with the day's business headlines.
That's right, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. We'll be looking at the latest trade data from Nigeria. The oil producer has recorded a $19 billion trade deficit in 2020. And the UAE signs a deal to develop a solar power plant with an installed generation capacity of 500 megawatts in Ethiopia. The details on that and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we begin in Nigeria, which continues to deal with a worrying wave of school kidnappings. In the latest incident earlier on Friday, an unknown number of students were abducted from a forestry college in Kaduna State, located in Nigeria's northwest. The state security commissioner said the army was able to rescue 180 people, mostly students, but 30 other students remain unaccounted for. This marks the fourth mass school abduction since December. Well, let's get the latest on this. Phil Haza is joining me live from Abuja. Phil, what more can you tell us about this latest kidnapping incident in Nigeria, and how was the rescue operation executed?
Thank you, Beatrice. So at the moment, we do not have the exact details of how the operations went. What we do know is that the Kaduna State government, through the Internal Home and Security Affairs, have actually come out to say that the security operatives were swift enough to, catch up with the the kidnappers, and they were able to also engage in a gunfight where they were able to rescue 180 people. Now, out of the 180 people, 172 of them were students of the Forestry Mechanization School in Kaduna State, and then 8 of them were staff members. But then it's not clear whether the remaining 30 who are missing are in the hands of these abductees, rather the hands of these criminal gangs, or they ran, because when these kind of kidnappings happen, the criminals shoot on rampage and try to scare people. So it's possible that the remaining 30 are either missing, maybe not in the hands of the kidnappers, but that detail is not what we're not clear. But the state government says that there's a search and rescue operation ongoing to find and recover these 30 people.
So, Phil, are the government measures enough to maintain adequate security, or are we likely to see more abductions from learning institutions?
It's very difficult, really, to say whether we're going to be seeing more abductions. Of course, it's a prayer that no one in Nigeria will be praying at the moment, especially when you look at the fact that these students, they have relatives, they have parents, they have family members who are currently scared, especially with having their children in boarding schools that are on the outskirts of different states, especially in the northern part of the country. So, but then the president has come out recently when the previous attack happened in Zamfara, involving nearly 300 schoolgirls, to say that that was the last time the country will ever witness any form of abduction. But seeing this again tells you that, of course, the government will need to do more. Security experts have said that there has to be increased intelligence gathering. There has to be more involvement of community policing, community leaders, the citizenry, in terms of policing the environment, because the security apparatus at the moment is overstretched. The country is faced with quite a number of security challenges, from insurgency and a whole lot more in the northern part of the country. Also, the president has said that state governments will have to stay away from paying ransoms to these criminals, although they've actually come out to debunk that. So there's quite a lot more that the government will really need to do.
Indeed. Philly Haza joining us there from Abuja. Thank you. Representatives of the government and the South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance faction have recommitted to the 2017 cessation of hostilities agreement. During the just concluded round of talks in Naivasha County, the parties agreed to abstain from any form of violence and duly investigate violations of human rights. They have also agreed to grant unhindered and unconditional access to humanitarian assistance to all areas in the Republic of South Sudan. The parties have signed a declaration of principles that constitute the basis for the subsequent political dialogue to resolve outstanding national differences.
The two agreements that we have signed are very important, and they are important milestones towards achieving a sustainable and inclusive peace in our country.
I can assure you, on behalf of the government and on behalf of President Salva Kiir, we have come with an open mind, committed with the spirit of cooperation, reconciliation, so that we can have a peace process that satisfies the wishes of the people of South Sudan as a whole, both opposition and government.
No military solution can bring a lasting peace and stability to the Republic of South Sudan. Instead, a negotiated and just political settlement will be the common objective of all the parties to achieve a permanent and sustainable peace.
More than 40 ambassadors of different countries based in Ethiopia have visited the Tigray regional state capital, Mekelle. The diplomats expressed readiness to support Ethiopia's effort to calm the region and deliver aid. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
Diplomats representing 40 countries have arrived in Mekelle city to observe the peace and humanitarian situation of the region in person. Once there, the ambassadors have been briefed by the heads of the Tigray Provisional Administration. The humanitarian service being given to war-affected citizens works to address human rights violations, and the overall peace and security of Tigray have been discussed. U.S. Ambassador to Ethiopia later told local media that her government will support its Ethiopian counterpart in the latter's effort to manage the challenge in Tigray.
We are very proud to be contributing in many ways. We also are thankful for the briefing we have received here. The United States will continue its support for the friendly people of Ethiopia. We are also excited to be on this side of Ethiopia at this difficult time.
Other ambassadors who visited Tigray said the opportunity to witness what happens in the region helps to decide in which areas their respective governments can and will cooperate with Ethiopia. The head of Tigray Provisional Administration, Mulu Naga, said the aid from the global community is only 30% and must be increased as soon as possible. The government says the work of rehabilitation and reconstruction in Tigray is ongoing, and for that, damage assessments and financial allocations are being finalized. All aid agencies are said to be part of this planning.
We are exerting a true effort towards the reconstruction of Tigray. For this, we have a committee formed by the federal government led by the Minister of Finance and remembered by all international aid organizations. This committee has started assessing the situation on the ground, including the damage done during the war. We will change all this into a program, allocate budget and put it on the ground.
On the other hand, the African Union has expressed its happiness after Ethiopia has announced its willingness for any independent investigation of the claimed humanitarian abuses in the Tigray region. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, Turkey says it has resumed diplomatic contacts with Egypt. Bilateral ties were particularly strained after the removal of Mohamed Morsi, Egypt's first democratically elected president and a close ally of Ankara. Both countries have been at opposing sides on several issues, including the Libyan conflict and the use of Mediterranean resources. It is not yet clear what discussions have taken place. But Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan says while the talks have not reached the highest level, he hopes to continue the process of further cooperation with Egypt.
This is why as long as these intelligence, diplomatic and political talks yield results, we can carry this to more advanced levels because it is out of the question for the Egyptian people and Turkey to be separated.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Rwandan President Paul Kagame gets COVID-19 vaccine amid efforts to roll out inoculations across Africa. And Cape Town unveils its latest initiative in its quest to become a carbon-neutral city.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Uganda is rolling out its COVID-19 immunization campaign after receiving an initial batch of over 900,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. These come from the COVAX facility and via donations from the government of India. Here's Isabel Nakiria.
Robina Nabanja has been at the forefront of campaigns against the spread of COVID-19 at Uganda's health ministry, ensuring safety measures in communities were followed. This put Robina's life at risk. She says getting the jab is timely.
I was not so nervous. I was like, I wish it would happen so that I'm safe from COVID-19.
Massimiliano Mazzanti is one of the first people to receive the COVID-19 vaccine in Uganda. He says the last year was tough, trying to keep himself safe from catching the virus.
I really wanted, some strong solution to the pandemic and try not to get it, try not to spread it through my family. I have 4 children and a wife, of course. So my idea was that of getting the closest possible to the vaccination, get vaccinated, and start finally to do a normal life.
Vaccination will be carried out in phases as more doses arrive. The country expects to receive 2.6 million more doses of the AstraZeneca jab from the COVAX facility by June.
About 200 people are queuing up for the jab at this center in Kampala, and authorities expect more people to turn up. A similar exercise is going on countrywide. Authorities say the exercise will go on for 10 days in this initial phase of vaccination.
Vaccine hesitancy is high, but the country aims to vaccinate about 49% of its adult population by the end of the year. Uganda has seen over 300 confirmed COVID-19 deaths, and 19 of these were health workers. Authorities say the vaccination will reduce the strain in the healthcare system.
One, it protects the person from getting severe disease or dying from it. It protects the family around him because transmission is expected to be less, although we are still building on evidence on that. But also, when one is not sick and one is not transmitting, we also deprive the virus from multiplying a lot of times.
The Minister of Health is encouraging people to maintain mask wearing and washing hands, warning the risk of infection remains in the early stages of the vaccine rollout. And for people who have already received the shot like Robina and Mazzanti, their protection will not develop immediately. But Robina says it's the moment she's longed for. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has become the first leader in East Africa to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. President Kagame received his jab alongside his wife Jeanette. It has not been specified which vaccine they received. Rwanda has received some 100,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine and about 240,000 doses of the AstraZeneca. The country plans to inoculate about 30% of its population this year and another 60% by the end of 2022. In February, Rwanda became the first country in East Africa to begin vaccinating against COVID-19, targeting high-risk groups such as healthcare workers. While the coronavirus pandemic has been an unprecedented period in recent history, with reports of many lives lost, ravaged economies and a state of collective pressure, many nations have been keen on a vaccine that could slow down the disease. While several vaccines began production last year, when it comes to distribution and availability to poor nations, a new challenge is threatening to derail the collective fight against COVID-19. CGTN's Lindy Mtongana takes a look at the rise of vaccine nationalism and Africa's position in the scramble for the few available doses.
For over a year now, Africa's healthcare systems have been stretched thin by the coronavirus pandemic. Over 100,000 people across the continent have succumbed to the disease, many of them doctors and nurses. With a second wave now spreading through parts of Africa, experts agree the only way to firmly end this pandemic is through widespread vaccination campaigns. Unfortunately, the majority of Africans may wait up to 2 years to receive their doses. In this episode of Panorama Africa, we take a look at unequal access to vaccines and life-saving medicines in Africa. It's another busy morning at the Huatele oxygen plant here in Nairobi. Since 2014, this social enterprise has been quietly supplying oxygen to patients in public and private health facilities across Kenya. But it wasn't until the coronavirus pandemic that the country's health sector really paid attention to what happens here.
The most memorable time was around October, November last year, 2020. That's when the mortality was quite high. We had hospitals coming to this plant and basically fighting for oxygen.
Huatele had to boost production dramatically.
We had to hire more people so that we could produce 24/7. We had to expand our distribution infrastructure by leasing more trucks and importing more canisters, the cylinders, to allow us to meet the demand of the market. Basically, if we compare our pre-COVID and at the height of COVID, the demand doubled.
Though Kenya may have been spared the worst of the pandemic, Dr. Olayo and other experts are hoping vaccines will help ease the pressure on the country's healthcare system. Kenya has already received its first batch of just over 1 million AstraZeneca vaccines. A total of 24 million doses will be administered across the country in a 3-phase rollout. The first phase has already begun, targeting health workers, teachers, and those in the security sector. Most Kenyans could be vaccinated by 2022, but the timelines are much worse in other parts of Africa, with full rollout expected to be completed by late 2023, if at all. So why isn't Africa receiving the vaccines it needs? Let's take a look at how vaccines get to Africa. Most low-income countries will rely on COVAX, the WHO initiative aimed at securing 6 billion doses of vaccines for poorer countries. COVAX will only cover 20% of the population of each country. The first 2 billion doses will be administered in 2021, primarily to healthcare workers. The challenge is COVAX must first procure these vaccines, and this is getting harder as richer nations race ahead of poorer ones buying up crucial supplies. Canada has pre-ordered enough vaccines to inoculate its population 5 times over. The UK and the US have bought enough vaccines for 4 per person, while the EU and Australia will have 2 each. Consequently, the African Union has entered into bilateral agreements directly with vaccine manufacturers, successfully procuring 270 million doses of vaccines for the continent. But it's hardly enough for Africa's 1.3 billion people. Furthermore, these agreements tend to be more expensive. South Africa paid 2.5 times more than European countries for the AstraZeneca vaccine. To make matters worse, these orders have been complicated by export controls introduced by the European Union. This mechanism gives countries the power to deny authorization for vaccine exports if existing contracts within the EU have not been met. An alternative, as advocated by South Africa and India, is to push the World Trade Organization to allow for any patents related to COVID-19 vaccines to be waived. This means that anyone, anywhere, would be allowed to manufacture the vaccines quickly and cheaply.
It's in essence a very, very fair and very reasonable demand to say, listen, during the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, we all need to be able to manufacture what can help us get out of the pandemic.
The proposal has received the support of the African Union, but has met stiff opposition from some of the world's wealthiest countries, including the European Union, the United States and Switzerland, all of whom are home to major pharmaceutical companies.
It goes against the language, of course, of equitable vaccine distribution. So we can, of course, only speculate as to why they don't want to support the waiver. But the consequence, in essence, is that they don't want to share. And that's perhaps the reason. They don't want to share the ability and technology to manufacture vaccines.
It's a sad situation for the global health community, because you'd imagine that this would be the only time when people's lives would matter more than profits. Even Kenya as a country has capacity to reconstitute and develop these vaccines if that patent was waived. We can do it quickly, and that would be the best way, produce and deploy quickly within the country.
Sadly, it's not the first time that Africa finds itself facing unequal access to life-saving medical treatments. In 1998, 39 international pharmaceutical companies sued the South African government over its attempt to buy cheap HIV medicines from India, rather than expensive antiretroviral drugs from the United States. Though the case was eventually dropped due to public pressure, the damage had already been done. Delays in procuring affordable ARVs resulted in many unnecessary deaths.
During a time of pandemic, it cannot be left to the market forces, to the monopolies of a few pharmaceutical manufacturers, to determine the availability and secondly, the price, in this case, of vaccines and in the past of ARVs. If we are reliant on the rest of the world, wherever that is, to supply our vaccines, Africa is going to be last in line again. And that is what we're seeing now with regards to COVID-19 vaccines.
The pandemic has exposed and exploited the inequalities of our world. There is now real danger that the very tools that could help to end the pandemic, vaccines, may exacerbate those same inequalities. Vaccine nationalism might serve short-term political goals, but it's ultimately short-sighted and self-defeating. We will not end the pandemic anywhere until we end it everywhere.
Vaccine nationalism happens when governments sign deals with drug manufacturers, especially the ones in their own countries, to exclusively supply the necessary medicines to their own populations, as is the case with COVID-19 vaccines. The world has also witnessed cases where governments push their companies to be granted exclusive rights to supply medicines during disease outbreaks, like the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo has also been a theatre of similar events, as the Ebola outbreak continues taking grim twists and turns. Companies from Asia, America and Europe competed to supply their vaccines to the Great Lakes nation. In the race for a COVID-19 vaccine, some African governments and private researchers were part of the groundbreaking medical achievements recorded. But it seems Africans were less appreciated as the bragging rights ended up in Western capitals. For example, phase 3 trials of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine were conducted on South African citizens in October 2020. In November, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was tried on 400 volunteer Kenyan health workers. But when it comes to the acquisition and procurement of these drugs, it seems Africa is left playing second fiddle.
According to me, try it first on animals. See how it reacts, then and if it is okay, we will accept it.
My work has been affected, but if it is possible for everyone to be vaccinated, people will be free with life, freedom of movement, freedom to do their activities without the corona restrictions. That is my hope. I'm eagerly waiting for the vaccine.
I'll not get vaccinated and I'll not allow my family to do it. What if it has side effects? They could be revealed after many years. I don't trust new commercial vaccines.
I'm very scared, so I don't think I'll take it now due to what I'm hearing from people.
I'll take it because there's no problem taking it and to protect myself and protect others.
Dr. Olayo believes more needs to be done to address skepticism and misinformation.
So it's our responsibility as a public health community to educate the public and to explain to them the merits of vaccination. There's so many vaccines coming in. How different is the AstraZeneca from Pfizer and from Johnson & Johnson? This is deep science that an average Joe will not understand. So you need, and he's supposed to take that vaccine and to bring his kids to take that vaccine. So we need to educate them.
A year on, the disruptive nature of the coronavirus pandemic has become the new normal. Though there are some countries that are yet to embrace the importance of fighting on one front against this common enemy. So as long as vaccine nationalism dictates the means, COVID-19 shall be the end.
And let's now head over to South Africa, where the city of Cape Town has launched its first net zero carbon concept home. It is part of efforts to become a carbon neutral city by 2050. My Clean Green Home, as it's been called, was built using upcycled products from the shipping industry. The home's designers say they were inspired by nature. Here's CGTN's Travers Andrews.
This could be the home of the future in Cape Town. A living space that is highly energy efficient and carbon neutral. Costing around $30,000 to construct, My Clean Green Home is cleaner on the environment and more affordable than most other homes. The net zero carbon home also makes use of upcycled materials and is powered by clean energy, and the city hopes it will inspire others.
What we're trying to demonstrate here is that it's not only about technology. So it's not only about the solar panels or the water systems. It's also about thinking about your orientation and your design principles about where your rooms in your home go, or the windows. These buildings are also very well insulated.
Using solar panels for the power, the home is a living space that was constructed using shipping containers and wooden pallets. It also uses a grey water system that recirculates the rain-fed shower water to flush the toilet. The house was designed by a team of recent graduates and young professionals who built the house in just 2 weeks.
If you look at the overarching structure, there's an embedded generation of PV system installed in it, and then the entire footprint is shaded by this overarching structure, and then that obviously creates a lovely indoor climate.
It boasts a bedroom, living room and a fully fitted kitchen, and a hanging food garden completes a clever design concept.
What we considered in this design was a nature-inspired design idea based on the multifunctionalities of a tree. So if you look at a tree, you obviously see that the leaves can generate energy. The leaf also brings shade. The leaf also harvests the rainwater to nourish its root system.
For now, the home stands as testament to the city's ambitions for the future, one where all buildings are carbon neutral by 2030, followed by a carbon neutral city by 2050. The city of Cape Town is hoping the road to carbon neutrality will be paved by homes such as this, and the constant reduction in the cost of new technologies such as solar panels and grey water systems is only set to reduce the construction costs even further, making it a strong business case for all homeowners with the financial means. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And here's a quick recap of our top headlines this hour. An unknown number of students have been abducted from a forestry college in Kaduna State, located in Nigeria's northwest. The State Security Commissioner says the army was able to rescue 180 people, mostly students, but 30 other students remain unaccounted for. Representatives of the government and the South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance faction have recommended to the 2017 cessation of hostilities agreement. They have also agreed to grant unhindered and unconditional access to humanitarian assistance to all areas in South Sudan. And Turkey says it has also resumed diplomatic contacts with Egypt. Bilateral ties were particularly strained after the removal of Mohamed Morsi, Egypt's first democratically elected president and a close ally of Ankara. Both countries have been at opposing sides on several issues, including the Libyan conflict and the use of Mediterranean resources. And that's a look at your headlines. Well, let's now go to Ramanyang for the latest business news, Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Nigeria reports a $19 billion trade deficit. We'll look at the data. And the UAE signs a deal to develop a solar power plant with an installed generation capacity of 500 megawatts in Ethiopia.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in West Africa, where Nigeria reported a trade deficit of about $19 billion in 2020. Now, that is the first time that Africa's largest economy has reported a negative trade outcome since 2016. That enormous deficit represents a 317% decline compared to the trade surplus of about $6 billion recorded in 2019. Here's Deji Badmus with the details from Lagos.
To many close watchers of the Nigerian economy, the trade figures released by the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics are not really a surprise. The figures show how badly the Nigerian economy has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Not surprising, the statistics show that while the country's imports in 2020 increased by 17.3%, exports fell 34.8%. At the very heart of the decline is the country's economic lifeblood, crude oil. The export of the commodity dropped by 35.7%.
If you look at the structure of our exports and export earnings, oil still accounts for close to 95% of our export earnings. And because in 2020 we had a crash in oil price, we also had almost a crash also in oil output because of OPEC cuts, the pandemic and all of that. So once we had that challenge with the exports of crude oil, our balance of trade automatically crashed.
Nigeria's local currency has come under severe pressure lately. With the country's reserve depleting, the central bank has had to carry out at least 2 rounds of devaluation to stabilize the local currency. Analysts say the country's negative trade balance is partly to blame.
We are seeing an expansion in consumption of foreign goods in terms of manufactured goods, in terms of raw materials, in terms of importation of oil products, where we're not seeing a commensurate increase in the value of the products we are exporting. It's impacting on our foreign reserve, and the further impact of that is that you're going to see pressure in foreign exchange, which is why we're seeing Naira depreciate further.
Economic experts say the statistics is also a clear wake-up call for managers of the economy to redouble efforts at propping up the non-oil sector in order to address the huge trade deficit.
The terms of trade is also not favorable because of the quality of our exports. The bulk of our non-oil exports are primary products. And because they are not processed, they have very little value addition. They don't command very good price. And that goes to further weaken the value of our exports. So the weaker the export value, the less favorable is the balance of trade.
Nigeria has a lot of work to do to address its trade deficit. Many say the key to fixing the problem is local manufacturing and getting people to buy made in Nigeria. The government says it is building the needed infrastructure to make that happen, but it's quick to add that the process will take time. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
On to the business of clean energy. Ethiopia's government and Abu Dhabi energy firm PJSC Mastar have signed a memorandum of understanding in Addis Ababa. Now, that agreement will allow investments to be made from the UAE to fund the construction of a 500-megawatt solar power plant in Ethiopia. The signing of the MOU was initiated during a state visit by the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to the United Arab Emirates early last year. The primary objective of that MOU is to formalize intention of both parties to further discuss the potential areas of collaboration and possibly potential projects and services.
The potential is there, but the realization of those potential is requiring to have trusted partner like you guys. So today's MOU with Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company, Masdar, is a demonstration of enhancing public-private partnership. Ethiopia looks forward to the fruits of such partnership.
In any economy around the world, from Washington, D.C. to Beijing, the top priority for all of these countries is climate change. Climate change and renewable energy. So as a company focused on renewable energy, solar and wind, and when we look at Ethiopia, we see abundant resources for solar and wind, and we are really happy to be here.
Away from the continent, the European Central Bank says it will significantly ramp up the pace of its pandemic emergency bond purchases in a bid to smooth out market jitters about a rise in government borrowing costs. The ECB chief Christine Lagarde said the move over the coming months is aimed at preventing an undesirable early and sudden end to cheap credit when the Eurozone economy still needs support to recover from the damage inflicted by the pandemic. Lagarde said that although risks to the 19-nation currency club have become a bit more balanced, ongoing pandemic shutdowns were weighing on the economy in the short term. Uncertainty also remained over the speed of vaccinations and the threat posed by new variants of the virus. Global markets have been roiled recently by a rapid rise in bond yields, and that's been triggered by signs of high inflation on the horizon.
The Governing Council decided to keep the key ECB interest rates unchanged. We expect them to remain at their present or lower levels until we have seen the inflation outlook robustly converge to a level sufficiently close to but below 2% within our projection horizon, and such convergence has been consistently reflected in underlying inflation dynamics. These projections foresee annual real GDP growth at 4% in 21, 4.1% in 22, and 2.1% in 23. There is no reference to a particular day. There is no reference to any kind of yield curve control, if it is the question that you are angling to. We're not doing yield curve control. We are preserving favorable financing conditions.
A brief foray into orbital ballistics now. South Africa conducted a successful rocket launch this week. That event saw the test rocket travel nearly 18 kilometers into the atmosphere, achieving a new African hybrid rocket altitude record. The launch was conducted on Monday, the 8th of March. It proved to be the third time lucky for the team at the University of KwaZulu-Natal after earlier failures in 2014 and 2019. Well, the details, here's Angelo Coppola.
The successful launch saw the test rocket travel 17.9 kilometers into the air, achieving a new African hybrid rocket altitude record. It's been a difficult road with 2 failed attempts.
I'm happy to say that the predictions we made before the flight were pretty much bang on target. So it's really a validation process. We're validating flight performance of our propulsion system, of the vehicle itself, and of course of the software we use to do these simulations.
While the test was successful, the work done by the students in the program and the knowledge and experience they have gained have been invaluable.
So it's really important from the perspective of the students that have gone through our system, our postgraduate program, becoming skilled in fairly niche areas and just completing the loop. Engineering is product development. It's all about going from concept to final testing. And we've been able to do that.
The Phoenix program doesn't operate in a vacuum. Alongside it is the Sapphire program.
And the purpose of that program is to develop a propulsion system that is able to propel a small satellite launch vehicle into orbit so that we can start delivering satellites from that continent. We are about 3 years into that program. And later this year, we're hoping to do our first hardware test, a full-scale engine test of a prototype engine.
The 2 programs are beginning to deliver, but they require significant funding. The Department of Education, Science and Innovation have been funding the program thus far.
Sapphire is all about some big things, and we're throwing ourselves at the problem. We're making excellent headway, and we're really pretty optimistic that if we are able to secure funding, we're going to be able to develop a launch system, an indigenous launch system, to be able to launch small satellites from the African continent, and also to service the commercial market.
Rocket science in South Africa is due to benefit from this latest victory, and that covers the students as well as the industry itself and the country. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
One final story for you. China's laid out 7 tech areas of focus in its 14th five-year plan. Research will be focused on artificial intelligence and machine learning, space, quantum computing and semiconductors. CGTN's Daniela Arab-Moy has been speaking with an analyst on what this focus means for Africa's growing tech sector.
Consistent technological and innovation support from China has been one of Africa's major success stories of historical ties. According to analysts, China's introduction of small mechanization tools to support agriculture in Africa has registered a significant milestone.
The technology is not really geared only towards communication or ICT per se. It also includes farming, implementing technology towards farming, manufacturing as well.
Some of the mini mechanization tools which have been made available for African countries include processing machines and small harvesters.
It goes a long way also to build capability, especially in the African setup. So either training specialized or skilled laborers as well as unskilled laborers on matters technology, or anywhere that technology can be used to improve lives, both in agriculture as well as telecoms.
China this year launched the China-Africa Innovation Center in the country's Hubei province, aimed at building and promoting China-Africa scientific and technological innovation and cooperation.
In Kenya, they've already set up a knowledge transfer base. Some other countries where they've already had some big infrastructural projects like Djibouti and Zambia as well. They've already set up some of these centers so that they don't really just give us only the infrastructure.
China has pledged to increase research and development in technology and innovation by more than 7% per year between 2021 and 2025, in what many say is pursuit of major breakthroughs in technology. Chinese firms like Huawei, ZTE and China Telecom are already behind the core systems of new ICT infrastructure across Africa, and they are providing the next generation of technology. Chinese technology now serves as the backbone of network infrastructure in several African countries, benefiting millions of users. With the outbreak of the deadly coronavirus pandemic, China has pledged to focus on innovative vaccines to guard Africa and the world against future pandemics. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour in Global Business. We'll be heading over to Ghana. The West African oil, gold and cocoa producer plans to plug its fiscal deficit. It's gone into double digits, but it's trying to reduce it. We'll be going through its budget plans for 2021 when we return. Beatrice will be back with more news very shortly.
Nature is essential for humans to exist, from pollinating our crops to stabilizing our climate. But our natural world is under serious threat. Humanity's influence on the decline of nature is so great that around 1 million species already face extinction. One continent, Africa, is trying to halt the trend. There are some special people doing some incredible work on the ground to help conserve the continent's fauna, flora, and cultural heritage, whilst introducing these riches to the rest of the world.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Women rights activists in Egypt have raised their concerns about a law that seeks to change Egyptian women's rights around marriage and child custody. The draft law has been presented to Parliament for approval, but as Yasser Hakim reports, the proposed legislation has generated heated debate across the country.
The personal affairs laws that deal with marriages have always been controversial in Egypt. The latest draft, meant to improve the 21-year-old current law, has not been different. It has been strongly opposed by women's rights groups, especially the clause related to the powers of a guardian over the wife.
Clause number 6, which gives the guardian the legal right to divorce the woman from her husband. She can't even sign the marriage contract without a guardian's consent. Imagine we have female ministers who sign multi-billion-dollar contracts for their countries, but can't sign a marriage contract themselves.
Under another clause, that's number 103, a mother has no legal powers, although she's a custodian over her children. Only the father can renew their IDs and passports, manage their bank and financial documents, and approve or reject any of their traveling plans. Activists say these clauses reverse the rights women have earned recently.
On the political side, 1/4 of parliament are now women. 1/4 of the local councils are now women. 1/4 of the government are women. Economically, more women are holding leadership posts. It's mandatory for women to be board members of listed companies and banks, while SME loans go predominantly to women.
Those who have drafted the law say these clauses have already been in the previous law and are based on Islamic Sharia. And supporters defend the draft, saying it champions women's rights.
The draft law under study is a strong incentive for women. It recognizes her as a vital component in the family and community, and so gives her the power to reject a second marriage by her husband. It's no longer his decision alone. He can be jailed if he doesn't abide by her decision.
Another positive amendment is related to updating visitation rights to include electronic meetings and tougher punishments for those who break visitation rules. But even members of the public are divided into this debate.
At the moment, the draft looks fine. But personally, I think that the law should be reviewed by Al-Azhar Islamic scholars to ensure that it doesn't go against Sharia law, just for reassurance.
Why put a guardian on the woman? Isn't she married? She's not a minor. Why should I let someone control her in marriage or even divorce? She's a free person.
The draft is currently under discussion in Parliament. No date has been set aside for voting on the law yet. But experts believe public pressure can influence subsequent proceedings. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Let's now take a look at your sports headlines. Here's what's ahead. South African businessman Patrice Motsepe elected president of African football.